in a time when darkness enveloped the land with its thick blanket, and only moonlight dared to pierce through in wisps of silver among clouds that hummed soft lullabies into the night sky. There was but one sound amidst this quietude, the gentle flowing whispers from the Rappahannock River. It meandered lazily along Virginia's verdant banks under a canopy of stars and an indigo expanse overhead that promised dreams both grim and grand to those who dared listen with hopeful hearts or sought solace in its uninterrupted serenity, like I did now as my boots crunched the dry leaves beneath them while I held watch over these lonely waters. Picket duty was never for me. It brought back too many memories and feelings that still linger on this soul of mine, young soldier with eyes once brightened by innocence, but now dulled from years spent in the heartache between brotherly factions torn asunder over ideals. Yet fate had cast a peculiar role for me tonight. I stood here under Virginia's vast skyline and watched not just my river friends sail along their pathways to freedom or bondage. I saw no such lines drawn there, only nature itself playing its part in the lives of everyone who dwelled by her banks. The Rappahannock River felt like an old friend I had yet to meet. It knew secrets that would make even me blush if spoken aloud, tales from a time when brother fought against brother for dreams and fears as intertwined as the roots of those tall oak trees standing guard beside her curves. My duty was simple: keep watch for any sign or whisper through its currents, but my mind often wandered to thoughts not mine alone, thoughts shared with a soldier I had come across before in camp and exchanged smiles under different skies on separate nights like this one. His name, that is something the Rappahannock could never bear witness to, for names were treasures meant only to be spoken close enough that they might not ripple through its waters as echoes of a past we both knew all too well. Or so I thought until tonight, when our paths crossed again. He wore his uniform with pride, yet carried the weight it bore on every threadbare button and frayed cuff, but beneath lay something far more precious: hope that he might return home to be greeted not by conflict-laden eyes of disillusionment or fears unspoken, but rather those warm embraces of familiar faces waiting in Virginia's own soil. The Union camp shimmered just beyond my line like a distant star caught between two forces vying for the night sky. I knew them all too well as friends lost to circumstance and choices made under duress, yet tonight their lights seemed kinder when compared with how they had once pierced through Virginia's darkness. There was something almost endearing about seeing camaraderies formed in such dire straits that now only flickered like the candlelight of a homebound soldier, its flame struggling to survive against encroaching wind and unspoken dread for those left behind, yet persisting as if defiant even unto death itself. I found myself drawn closer by invisible strings connecting me across miles that lay between my current posture upon this riverbank with the memories of past trades shared on such silent nights. Smiles exchanged over a piece or two for some fresh tobacco here and there, each transaction imbued with stories untold beneath their folded leaves. These were tokens not just of commerce, but encapsulated conversations held in hushed tones, secrets that only these quiet evenings between men could bear witness as one another sought solace from the burden carried upon this weary heart, a silent prayer whispered into each ember before it danced away towards oblivion. The Rappahannock River and I shared an understanding, for she had borne her own tales of sorrowful goodbyes as many hands held tightly to hers in both despair and hope, or testament that life carried on within its depths despite the tragedies it bore witness to. Tonight's sky was a canvas streaked with clouds like brushstrokes from an artist unsure of his own masterpiece. Yet, even as they painted shadows upon her surface, I couldn't help but imagine them playing hide and seek along our riverbanks, or game only nature herself might understand. As the moonbeam found its way across my path to illuminate some fallen twig or another that had sought refuge from daytime's fury amongst these roots. It was in Chapter 2 of our tale, by the Rappahannock River. There was a gentle breeze that carried whispers from yesteryears and tomorrow alike through its rustling leaves, an orchestra accompanying those who shared stories underneath my canopy. As nights like these had become frequent companions for many travelers seeking both refuge by the water's edge, their tales of lost loves and found paths often melded into a single narrative that I alone heard with patience only granted to an ancient being such as myself. One evening in particular stood out amongst them, a light tale not just told, but lived beneath my leaves. It began on the eve when autumn's chilly fingers first caressed our land and ended upon a late winter night that seemed neither end nor beginning, simply another phase of time passing by unnoticed. It was then that two solitary figures found themselves underneath me. Samuel Eldridge, with his weathered face bearing the road map of miles traveled across this very river, and Jonathan Harper, whose eyes held depths as profound yet troubled as my own shadowy roots beneath which he often sat. They had not met before that night, but were drawn together by fate's invisible thread, Samuel having left his homeland for a new life on the distant west coast with hope in tow, and Jonathan returning from war, carrying scars unseen among those still beating within him. As they exchanged glances across their shared table of an old tavern that lined our river-bank just beyond, where I stood tallest, place, as familiar to me as my own rings were true witnesses of time passing by, could see the hesitance before a smile would break through, revealing understanding without need for words. Samuel offered Jonathan his last piece of freshly smoked Virginia hams and mild cheeses. Each bite seemed like an invitation to speak freely about things left unsaid when they were once close friends, but now distant souls seeking solace from the weight their pasts had become upon them. As night enveloped us, with only my gentle rustling leaves as a soundtrack and twinkle stars above casting silver streaks on our shared world or place, where both found themselves lost yet not alone in this small town of Rappahannock's embrace, they spoke about the things that haunted their dreams. Samuel revealed tales from his voyage across oceans and how he had often wondered whether to keep moving forward or stay rooted as deeply within himself, much like me here on this bank, where I remained steadfastly anchored despite years of seasons changing around my trunk. Jonathan listened intently with a soul that seemed more attuned every moment passing by, like leaves turning color in the autumn wind. He shared stories from battlefields strewn across his homeland, and how he found himself questioning not just who had taken him to war, but also why their fates were so intertwined amidst strangers at times like these, when both men sought answers that seemed as elusive on land's surface as my own heart would. As they uncovered layers of each other's lives, the Rappahannock River continued to flow in its serene course through time and space, of steadfast companion, witnessing humanity dance upon her shores with such fragility yet resilience that one cannot help but be moved by their shared histories beneath my watchful eyes. Samuel spoke of his son, a bright young soul whose laughter once echoed around this very tavern, where Jonathan sat, nowhere boy, who had vanished without trace or explanation, as if he were whisked away like leaves carried off into the river's current, and Jonathan confessed that in battlefields distant from here yet connected through his heart, there was a young woman whose eyes held secrets Samuel would never find answers for. The night grew deep with their shared histories woven together beneath my protective Bowser tapestry of lives lived fully upon this earth, and the silent prayers that seemed to echo into each ember before they danced away towards oblivion underneath zero star's gaze. It was not until midnight when a peculiar hush fell between them, for even as Jonathan fought hard memories against their relentless tide, he could feel within him the stirrings of hope or promise that perhaps through understanding one another and embracing this shared journey by my side, there might be solace found in each other's presence. Samuel reached across to cup Jonathan's weathered hands with gentle warmth. His touch seemed like a balm for wounds unseen yet deeply felt within these two strangers whose stories had become interlaced as the night seemed to stretch on forever, as Jonathan and Samuel found themselves wrapped in an unspoken comfort that only grew stronger with each passing hour under my boughs, their shared histories creating a tapestry of intertwined souls beneath this very canopy where I stood sentinel. As the hours ticked by, weaving into stories yet to be told and memories long since faded into dusty corners of time's vast library, Samuel found himself lost in thought or reflection on his lineage as he traced a finger along an ancient family crest carved delicately into my side. "I remember grandfather speaking fondly of your father," Samuel murmured to Jonathan with the reverence reserved for sacred tales and whispered confessions between kin, "and I've been curious about where you hail from." His voice was gentle as his gaze never left Jonathan's face, or look that spoke volumes without a word being exchanged. Jonathan leaned forward in the creaking wooden chair he had taken since their meeting by my trunk, and with an earnest expression mirroring Samuel's own curiosity, said softly, From what I recall of those tales, grandfather told hail from lands afar, where valor is etched into every warrior's soul. But here," he sighed deeply, "the battles are never truly done. They live on in whispers and the fading heartbeats that once echoed triumphantly through these hallowed taverns." As Jonathan spoke of his pastor life painted with brushes dipped into both joy and sorrow as vividly as any artist's palette could muster, Samuel's own story found resonance. He shared tales not just of the present city he called home, but also ventured to recount ancestral legends that had been passed down through his family for generations, tales where love and loss danced hand in hand under starlit skies on nights much like this one, when time seemed as fluid as my sap flowing unimpeded. As the moon reached its zenith, painting silver across our shared space beneath me, Jonathan's hands found Samuel's with a tentative touch that belied his years of experience in battle, but not at heart a man who knew well how to shield another from harm without ever raising his voice or drawing down weapons. The two men sat together as if nothing had changed since their last meeting. The world seemed anew, reborn under my watchful eye and guardian presence. It was then that a tender breeze whispered through leaves above us a herald of dawn approaching with promises to unravel night's embrace, but not before they shared one more chapter in their silent dialogue beneath me. Samuel took Jonathan's hand, his touch warm and sure as he traced the lines etched by age upon those hands that had once held so much promise for a son lost to war, a gesture of solace amidst memories unvoiced yet deeply felt between them, two souls from worlds apart, now finding common ground. Within their silent exchange, an understanding began blossoming like the first bud on my branches in spring. They discovered kindred spirits beneath a tapestry woven with shared humanity and vulnerability, realization that though their lives had taken them down different paths for years untold, here under me, where time seemed to stand still as I swayed gently upon this earth, the night air grew cooler. Even the stars above must have grown weary of shining steadfastly through countless cycles since they first twinkled into existence, eons agors, if aware that their ancient light was now a mere backdrop to Jonathan and Samuel's quiet communion beneath my sheltering presence. A profound peace descended upon the two men as soft, amber hues of dawn began painting hope on distant xeriscapes. They found solace in this shared journey by my side, or pilgrimage not just through time, but across souls touched briefly together under a canopy where I had stood sentinel for generations. And so, as the first light of day began to peek timidly over distant hills and into their quiet corner beneath me, Jonathan looked up at Samuel with gratitude shining in his icer gleam that spoke louder than words could ever hope to convey. "I am grateful for this night, for you are not just a stranger now. Tonight we shared more of ourselves together than I have had the courage to reveal before." Samuel's smile was one born from kindred spirits finding solace in each other's presence, his own gaze soft and understanding as he met Jonathan's. "I feel it too, Samuel," as Jonathan and Samuel settled into a comfortable silence beneath my ancient boughs, their backpacks resting beside them, laden with journals rather than goods for trade or battle. They felt as if this night was not just about their meeting, but an exchange of the ineffable between two kindred spirits. The air grew cooler. Even the stars above must have grown weary of shining steadfastly through countless cycles since they first twinkled into existence, eons agors, if aware that their ancient light now served as a mere backdrop to this intimate connection beneath my sheltering presence. I offered them solace. Chapter 4. The mythical legends of the forest's heart. The two men had journeyed from opposite ends of an expansive land. Jonathan with his rugged face and calloused hands, Samuel, whose eyes seemed to carry stories untold within their depths. It was beneath my sprawling branches that they discovered a shared love for the mystical legends passed down through generations in both of their families about the forest's heart, or sacred grove hidden deep within these woods, known only by those who carried its story on their tongues and spirits alike. Within Samuel there was already an unspoken kinship with nature that seemed to resonate at a frequency beyond mere human understanding. His fingertips brushed the bark of my trunk as if they were tracing back through time itself. Jonathan too had tales tucked away in every crease and scar upon his body, each mark bearing witness to years spent working with earth, shaping it into something both enduring and beautiful under suns that rose and set without fail for ages beyond counting. As they continued their journey towards the heart of my forest kingdom on this night, when darkness began her retreat in favor of morning's tentative embrace, Samuel suggested a pause to recount these stories or tradition from his lineage where tales were shared as if through an invisible thread that wove listeners and storyteller into one. Jonathan agreed with enthusiasm. He too had heard the legend before, but never felt it pulse so vividly in conversation, nor did he feel such a strong bond formed between two souls over these ancient words spoken aloud beneath my watchful gaze. Their voices were low and carried only as far as necessary to preserve their privacy or sacred space amidst the eternal sentinel that I provided for them. As they shared tales of creatures both fanciful and fearsome, spirits benevolent or malevolent who guarded these woods, through time immemorial a sense grew within each man's chest. This was no random meeting, but rather an ordained encounter meant to unfold beneath my boughs. The legend spoke of the forest's heart as not just any place, but one where two souls could find solace and healing in shared empathy when crossing paths with another under duress or sorrow. A testament that these woods themselves seemed invested, whispering through leaves, rustling on breezes born from ancient magic. Jonathan's voice softened as his story wove into Samuel's tapestry of personal loss and grief, where each thread was tenderly interlaced with hope for redemption found in unexpected companionship. Samuel, touched by the raw honesty that poured forth from his new friend's heart, felt a kinship deep and beyond mere friendship. It seemed as though their spirits were entwined across time and space beneath my protective canopy, bonded through shared lineage stories passed down to them this night. He confided in Jonathan tales of familial hardships he had faced alone before the solace found within these woods provided him unexpected comfort during his own darkest hours, when friends or kin could not provide respite from life's relentless trials, and a smile tugged at the corners of Samuel's lips, a reflection mirrored in Jonathan's. As they delved deeper into their shared stories nightly beneath my sheltering presence, I felt myself growing younger with each retelling. These tales were not just words, but living entities that breathed and grew within me as if nurtured by the sapling's essence itself, a testament to how deeply intertwined they had become. As dawn approached its first chaste light, a silence settled between Jonathan and Samuel which spoke volumes. It was an unspoken agreement of mutual respect for each other's soul-bearing tales told beneath my watchful presence, and understanding that in sharing their stories with one another they found not just companionship, but also the beginning of healing. Jonathan glanced at Samuel, his gratitude no longer. Jonathan and Samuel found themselves enveloped in a comforting stillness as they sat beneath my ancient boughs, their hands interlocked like roots seeking water from deep within soil, or tactile reminder of newfound kinship that had taken root over the seasons past. The night air was crisp with dew-laden whispers, and starlight dappled through leaves above them when Samuel began to unfold another story, a tale woven into his family tapestry since time immemorial. It all started in our homeland, he mused softly. Our people were humble tillers of the earth, cultivators who worked with reverence for every seed and drop of water. His voice was a tender murmur, his words painting landscapes that transcended their tranquil spot beneath my sheltering canopy. But then came years when plague swept through our lands. Samuel continued as if the memory itself sought release from within him. Families were torn apart, kin lost to fever and despair. His eyes found Jonathan's, reflecting a depth of sorrow for histories he carried, a heavy crown that only time could bear or relieve upon one's brow. I remember the day when my own child fell ill, Samuel whispered with a grief-tinged reverence to our shared humanity beneath this same night sky, and I had no choice but to leave her in others' care. His tale flowed like sap through veins of their intertwined spirits, an offering made on the altar of survival. Jonathan listened with rapt attention as Samuel's narrative drew him into a world where love knew neither bounds nor borders, and loss carved hollow echoes in generations. Laughter that once filled our shared earthly home, I felt, Jonathan said between soft sighs of empathy. The weight you bear is like the seasons themselves, eternal yet ever-changing. As their stories spiraled outwards, a delicate dance began, threads from past and present wove into one another with each word spoken beneath my watchful gaze. It was as if time itself grew imperceptible at that moment between them, bending to accommodate the sanctity of shared history or communion deeper than mere tales exchanged over hearth fires or within hushed libraries' dusty corners. Samuel paused and looked up into my leaves with a look of silent gratitude before continuing his confession that spilled forth like water from an ancient spring. I once thought solace was found in the arms of another, but I now understand it resides within these woods or among kin not born to me. His tale unfurled into revelations about a love he had let go for fears rooted deeper than his own lineage's struggles. Jonathan too shared fragments from times when laughter was currency and sorrow, an unwelcome guest in homes where the scent of baking bread mingled with hopeful dreams. My family's fortunes ebbed and flowed like tides against our cliffs, he recounted. Through his narrative came a sense that life's trials were universal undercurrents ever present in the depths of human experience across all cultures beneath my leaves or beyond them, whether near to where they sat now or worlds away on forgotten shores untouched by time's passage. The air grew cooler with night's advance as Jonathan and Samuel delved into stories that were not solely their own, but rather a shared human journey woven from myriad threads or tapestry rich in sorrow yet embracing of hope. They spoke softly about the strength found within themselves when standing alone against life's tempests. They whispered reverently over tales where kindness triumphed and spirits soared above mountains that had witnessed empires rise and fall from their peaks unnoticed by history's eyes, but not its heart. Here, beneath my boughs, Jonathan said as the night deepened into a velvet sea around them, we share something beyond words or connection to all who have come before us. Samuel nodded in agreement. Their spirits resonated with shared ancestry and common humanity that transcended time's relentless march, much like how my roots intertwined beneath the earth's surface as old trunks embraced newcomers. As hours passed unnoticed by clock, or sunlight's journey across horizons beyond their secluded glade, a gentle understanding settled upon the mass shared recognition that in this sacred exchange of stories and histories was found not just the comfort. Jonathan and Samuel's journey beneath my ancient boughs had been a pilgrimage through time itself, a voyage of discovery that spanned generations, cultures, and heartaches long past. The two young men were kindred spirits with an insatiable thirst for tales, not merely told, but felt in the marrow of their being. It was as if each word they shared drew them closer to understanding themselves amidst a world often too loud to hear its own stories whispered from yesteryear's lips. As night's embrace tightened around the glade, shadows grew longer and danced upon Jonathan's face in silent giggles as his mind wandered through ancient Greek amphitheaters, where philosophers debated. Under my bough like elms of Athensor Place I had witnessed many a spring shower. Samuel's thoughts, too, took flight on wings made from the feathers of fabled birds that spanned continents and skies to share with his friend tales not just heard, but lived by indigenous cultures who knew me as an elder rather than merely trees standing tall amidst their lands. They found themselves in medieval castles, where knights pledged oaths of fealty under the watchful gaze of monarchs whose names were swallowed and reborn, with each telling like water through histories. Sitting here, they sat together as equals beneath my foliage. In Renaissance Italy, art flourished in fervid strokes upon canvases. Poets composed verses that would echo down to the very leaves of me now resting above them, both with stories I had seen bloom and wilt through seasons many times over. Yet, amid this flowering culture, they felt a kindred spirit, an affinity for expression so raw it seemed almost divine. The storytelling journey took Jonathan into revolutions where ideals of liberty were sparked by the whispers amongst trees like me before being shouted in defiance across crowded squares that became battlegrounds. Yet even there he felt a resonance with his present companions, for as they now fought their own silent battles, finding strength and solace through shared stories beneath my shade. Samuel's tales carried him to the heart of civil rights movements, where voices rose in unison against oppression, where history was not just observed but lived upon by souls brave enough like himself. It felt here as though Samuel had always been walking alongside Jonathan, a testament that their bond transcended time. They spoke with fervor and warmth about tales of resilience where the human spirit soared despite gravity's pull, of times when people rose above themselves to uplift others in acts of profound kindness, like rivers carving through canyons, shaping worlds without even knowing it. Their dialogue was a testament that empathy and understanding were as timeless companions as the very air I breathed. As stories unfurled from Jonathan's lips about scientists who dreamed of galaxies beyond our own, of astrophysicists whose eyes had gazed upon my leaves but saw further into space, seeking answers to questions that humankind pondered since before we even knew ourselves as humans, Samuel too shared his wonder at the intricate dance between humanity and technology. From ancient tools forged from fire-hardened wood I might have once borne on their backs during journeys of discovery into unknown territories, to modern marvels that allowed them a glimpse beyond my secluded glade with cameras in hand capturing fleeting moments, as ephemeral as dew upon morning grass. Their shared history was one vast tapestry. Each tale wove deeper connections between the two friends and all those who had come before. Their bond grew stronger, rooted not just within my presence, but extending into infinity like countless branches reaching out to touch stars that seemed as real in this sacred hour of storytelling under my canopy as I was. Their laughter carried on breezes where no winds blew and mingled with the rustle of leaves, a harmony so profound it could only be music played by those who shared lifetimes' worth of melodies within their hearts, or symphony composed not in concert halls but beneath my protective embrace. As dawn began to hint at its approach through wisps of pale light that sifted into the clearing, Jonathan and Samuel felt a tranquil satisfaction, for though they had traveled across epochs, as one might meander down paths paved with cobblestones or gravel, stories shared beneath my boughs carried them back to where their journey began. They recognized that within this sacred exchange of histories and knowledge Jonathan and Samuel settled into a comfortable silence beneath my canopy. Their eyes occasionally brushed over one another's face of soft glow in daylight that spoke of shared glances between old friends who had known each other for lifetimes' worth of melodies within their hearts. The air was alive with the scent of damp earth and green leaves after a light rain, creating an atmosphere conducive to reflection on histories deeply intertwined like my own roots that have touched soils from all corners of this ancient land. It had been years since they last came here together, yet time seemed irrelevant in the sanctuary provided by nature's embrace and their enduring bond or testament, not just to shared experiences, but also a mutual understanding rooted in unspoken pacts made under my outstretched boughs. Samuel traced his fingers along Jonathan's hand, an intimate gesture that spoke of comfort without the need for words between two souls who had journeyed through seasons and sunsets together, as though they were one entity or single being in motion across a tapestry woven from countless threads representing moments lived. Without warning or prompting, Jonathan began to recount tales not told aloud before but shared now with Samuel's presence that anchored his words, like my roots, firmly within the soil of their friendship, stories about ancestors who had once roamed these lands in times when knights donned armor as light as feathers for jousting, where music echoed through open fields rather than contained in halls. They spoke not just to reminisce, but also to understand how history shaped them, like saplings nurtured by ancestral waters that flow beneath the earth's surface, unseen yet vital. Samuel listened intently as Jonathan narrated their forebears' exploits, tales of bravery and love entwined with loss during wars fought not just on battlefields, but in silent suffering at home, where families were torn apart by strife beyond borders or pain that still lingered like morning mist clinging to the land. The friends shared how their own parents had lived through times when fear of change was as palpable as the chill before a storm, and yet they had remained steadfast in hope for better days ahead. As Jonathan's voice ebbed with emotion over his narrative, Samuel reached out to touch him lightly on the shoulder, a silent exchange between brothers whose hearts beat together like leaves rustling against one another, as if whispering secrets only known by nature itself. He then offered a story of simpler times, when children chased fireflies in open fields and lovers pledged their eternal devotion under my very boughs, where promises were sealed with kisses that lingered on skin like dew upon grass at dawn, or promise not easily forgotten or faded by time. With every story exchanged beneath the shelter of foliage and history shared between hearts entangled in mutual respect for times gone and those still to come, Jonathan felt as though he was gazing into a mirror that reflected their intertwined lives, a reflection not just of two men, but also generations. Samuel's eyes sparked with understanding when Jonathan spoke about his grandmother who had been the keeper of family law. Stories were like seeds she scattered, sprouting in young minds and blooming into a legacy that now reached back to him through them both, a lineage rooted deep within these woods, as I am. The conversation meandered effortlessly from one memory to another, with no clear in point, but an ever-growing sense of unity between the two friends, their laughter melding seamlessly into a symphony composed by those who shared Liffet Zero's worth of melodies within their hearts, or music that transcended time and space beyond my protective embrace. It was as if each tale woven through Jonathan's narrative strengthened the bond, like intertwining branches reaching out to touch distant stars or leaves kissed by sunlight after rain, a connection so profound it seemed eternal, yet ever evolving with every shared memory and unspoken understanding. As they approached twilight time, when shadows stretch long across the land, painting everything in deeper hues of blue and gray as day gives way to night's tender care, Jonathan felt a peace settle upon him like dew on morning grass that only comes with dusk. He sensed their journey was not just about traversing epochs or sharing histories, but also uncovering the essence of what made them who they were in this moment beneath my boughs, where time ceased to exist and all moments lived together flow like a river finding its way back into it. As twilight descended upon the forest with its usual gracefulness, Jonathan and his old friend Edward meandered through a trail that seemed to have been written by time itself, or path of untrodden footprints leading in circles back into themselves like an Ouroboros. The setting sun threw long shadows across their journey while the crickets began their evening sonnet, and even as daylight retreated beyond my canopy's protective embrace, a warmth radiating from within bubbled up around them as shared sense of contentment that seemed to fill every inch of space between each spoken word. The conversation had taken many turns since they began their journey years ago, when Jonathan first sought solace beneath my limbs after the loss of his beloved. But as always with friends who understand one another's histories and sorrows so intimately, it never felt like a mere exchange. Rather, each memory shared was an echo from long past lives that brought them closer to understanding themselves. Today's topic had been the legend of Eldritch Mamor, a tale as old as time itself in this part of the world, and one so intertwined with Jonathan's family history, it felt like a piece of his soul resided within its haunting walls. Edward listened raptly while crumbling parchment-like pages seemed to form before their eyes from years spent together sharing stories as old as my rinsed same trees that bore witness to generations past and present alike, binding them all in perpetual connection through the tapestry of narratives they had woven over time. The tale spoke not only of ancestors whose lineage flowed like water, but also told a story of love lost too soon, a young maid who once danced under my boughs and sang with such passion that even now, centuries later, the memory lingered in every droplet of dew upon my leaves. The way Edward's eyes glistened as he absorbed each word was a testament to their shared humanity, for though they had traversed many lifetimes together within these woods and beyond them into realms where time held no dominion, it felt like just yesterday that Jonathan found his first friend or boy with laughter brighter than the sun's ray piercing through my canopy. In this moment of shared history beneath me, as they approached another day's end within these woods and began to think about their separate paths homeward, while I would remain a sentinel for years more, to Khmer guardian against time itself, which neither age nor wisdom could withstand fully, Jonathan felt an unspoken promise between him and Edward solidify, as if each memory shared fortified the invisible threads that bound them. Jonathan sighed contentedly at his companion's gaze resting upon my farthest leafy reaches, where time seemed to pause for a heartbeat before resuming its perpetual march forward beyond our protective embrace. He found himself wishing, with all the depth of years and wisdom that age bestowed him, yet not quite ready to part from Edward's company as twilight deepened into night. As shadows lengthened across landscapes familiar only in memory, no forest floor crunched beneath their feet like dry autumn leaves underfoot. Jonathan reached out and brushed his fingers against the rough bark of my trunk, feeling a connection so profound it seemed eternal, yet ever evolving with every shared memory. The cool night air wrapped around them as they sat at my roots in companionable silence, ere pause between chapters within their never-ending story that had unfolded beneath me time and again through countless seasons of the world's turning. Each breath drawn into his lungs carried whispers from those who once sought refuge under these same leaves, echoes of laughter and sorrow intermingling like sweet scents on a breeze. In this moment, where past merged with presenter confluence as inevitable within the natural world as rivers flowing into oceans, Jonathan realized that his journey had always been one not just about traversing epochs or sharing histories, but uncovering essence of what made them who they were beneath my bows. The forest around him seemed to understand this truth in its whispered language through rustling leaves and trickling stream Nature's own way of narrating the story of time itself as it folded into a river finding its way back to an endless sea from whence all things begin again with each sun or zero ver. With Edward's hand on his shoulder, Jonathan felt solace in knowing that no matter where he might go or what new chapters lay ahead, he would always return. Jonathan's fingers traced the ancient grooves in my bark as he reflected upon Edward's words, which seemed to seep deeper into his consciousness with every shared memory between them beneath their haven of wisdom and solace that I had come to know over countless seasons. It was not simply about uncovering layers hidden within each other's past. It was the essence they found in these quiet moments together, intertwined like my roots spread through fertile earth below us. The forest around them stood as a testament to continuity and cyclical existence, their silent guardian of time that had seen epochs rise and fall yet always remained steadfastly present for those who sought its embrace. In their shared silence, Jonathan felt an unspoken promise, one where the future was not something beyond but a place they could shape together within these woods, as Edward's hand found strength in his own against his backbone during moments when Jonathan's thoughts would wander to uncertain horizons and new beginnings. It wasn't just about looking into history, it was understanding its echoes. The laughter mingled with tears that were once whispered secrets under my leaves now becoming a part of them as they exhaled their own breaths in synchrony. The forest understood this truth. It knew well how to weave tales, not just from roots and soil, but also human hearts seeking comfort within its bosom, where the language need only rustle through fallen foliage or dance upon sun-dappled streams before disappearing into mist once more, an endless cycle of beginning as much as conclusion. Jonathan sensed that each step he took away from here was a journey back to himself and Edward's shared essence, which no distance could sever completely because their spirits were forever interlaced like the mycorrhizal networks below where they had once taken refuge so many times before when seeking answers or solace. As dusk began its slow descent upon them, painting a tapestry of amber and indigo across the sky above us with every passing cloud, their story continued to unfold beneath me in ways Jonathan hadn't yet fathomed as he watched Edward lean back against my trunk, now lost within thoughts. He could hear the soft snore from his friend, reminiscent not just of sleep, but a peaceful surrendering into something deeper and unexplored, like autumn leaves drifting to join others in an eternal dance below ground before re-emerging as new growth comes springtime's embrace. The world around them was quiet save for the symphony nature itself conducted, composed of myriad voices from wind through treetops and brook babble. It sang a song older than both Jonathan's ancestry or Edward's lineage, chorus as timeless as they had become within these woods. It spoke not just to them but also about time's flow, where moments are like drops in an ever-turning river seeking the ocean of eternity that lay beyond their grasp yet always remained close by when needed most. It was here beneath my canopy, their sanctuary and silent witness. Together they had weathered seasons, both harsh and gentle, from winters with naked branches to summers heavy with verdant growth where life's vitality surged around them like sap within me during springtime thaws. This cycle of renewal was mirrored in their own enduring bond that found strength not despite the passing time, but because it had been shaped by its passage, or living testament to resilience born from shared history. As night's mantle enveloped them and my branches cradled Edward's head, Jonathan understood now more than ever how their essences were intertwined within this place that felt not just like a physical location, but an ethereal meeting ground of souls where memories could be woven into the fabric of being or tapestry, as rich and varied as life itself beneath my watchful presence. He thought back to Edward's words, pondering how their journey had always been twofold, traversing through time while also delving deep within themselves for wisdom that lay dormant in every heartbeat shared under the canopy of stars above our convergence, where past and present melded into a singular point like rivers flowing seamlessly toward an ocean's embrace. Jonathan knew, as he looked upon his friend's serene face illuminated by fireflies that danced about us in gentle swirls around their heads, Edward had always been more than just companionship, was the keeper of memories and a mirror to himself through which they could reflect on who each one truly were beneath my boughs. As their shadows stretched long beneath my boughs, with each passing hour of twilight and nightfall encroached upon daylight. Edward laid back on Jonathan's shoulder while his head rested gently in Jonathan's arms against mine as whelmy limbs outstretching like the comforting embrace they sought. Their breaths melded together into a rhythmic whisper that sank deep within my rings and roots to where I stood guardian over countless such nights, their friendship an unwavering constant, through seasons of change as eternal as time itself in this place, between worlds or hallowed ground beneath this celestial canopy. In times when Edward's heart had felt heavy with loss, and Jonathan's soul burdened by sorrow that threatened to sever them, it was here, under my shelter, where they found solace, not just from their external trials, but also within themselves there bond a living testament of resilience, with every shared silence or laughter resonating in the crisp night air and each tear fallen on tender soil nurtured by ancient roots. Edward's essence became interwoven with Jonathan's through experiences that fortified their friendship as steadfastly as my own bark had fused over centuries. Underneath a sky painted with hues of deep indigo and scattered pinpricks of stars like diamonds on velvet cloth, Edward would find himself lost in the reverie of memories shared beneath these leaves, their history etched into every groove of my trunk, as if I were but an archive of their laughter-filled days, with each night's end and a new morning's beginning promised by dawn's gentle kiss. He would recall how they had navigated the tempests together when young men with hearts ablaze for life, bold explorers seeking horizons where love could bloom unchained as wildflowers upon my outspread routes. Jonathan too cherished these reminiscences of a time before their paths diverged under different skies, knowing well the strength that had been drawn from each other when solitude felt insurmountable and shadows loomed large in silent watches, their spirits intermingling like sap within me to form unyielding unity. And now, as Edward's breath quieted by age, his hand resting peacefully against Jonathan, the gentle symphony of their combined heartbeats became a lullaby sung softly under my foliage that seemed no less poetic than any composed for young hearts eager to hear tales spun from dreams. As time wove itself into their shared history and seasons turned over pages in an unseen calendar, they had grown toe to flesh, intertwining with bark as the years amassed beneath my sheltering form, while I stood silently vigilant against skyward tempests or under sun-dappled tranquillity. For within this living nexus of past and present lay a convergence that transcended mere camaraderie, becoming an intimate dance with time itself, where each memory played its part in their eternal ballad or fusion, not just between two souls, but also into the very being they were now as one. In this sacred enclave of whispers and rustling leaves that had borne witness to countless such stories, Edward's gaze would often find his way downward until it settled upon Jonathan's visage, a reflection, not just in flesh, but through a looking-glass into the depth of shared humanity. And as he beheld this portrait crafted from years together and apart, yet always returning here to converse with nature, there was comfort found knowing that no matter what seasons they traversed or which distant lands their feet might carry them across, this unwavering presence would forever be his anchor in the sands of time. Their essence within this place had become as much a part of my being and existence here upon earth's cradle, where every ring marked by growth bore testament to journeys embarked on our history, written not with pen, but pulses racing beneath skin that knew the sensation of hands held together through trials, both mundane and momentous. And as fireflies began their nightly waltz around them, casting silver golden glow upon every crease in Jonathan's smile or crinkle at the corner of Edward's eyes, it was clear that no matter how many summers they had weathered together beneath this very branching dome, each shared tale etched into my wooden flesh, a living record, where their laughter and whispers became part of something greater than themselves, or tapestry as rich in texture as the interwoven bark that bore silent testim as twilight descended upon them like a velvet cloak drawn close around their shoulders. Jonathan and Edward found themselves nestled in an embrace beneath my sprawling canopy of green leaves and emerald cathedral, where whispers often turned to roars among ancient oaks. The cool night breeze carried the fragrance of jasmine from a nearby meadow as it rustled through our shared branches, and Jonathan's fingers found their way restlessly around Edward's arm while his breath mingled with mine in synchronous rhythm to nature's own lullaby. Their souls had wandered far beyond the confines of this earthly cradle, embarking upon voyages that danced between shores and skies, weaving through epochs like threads, seeking their tapestry's purpose in a grand design spun by fates unknown. And yet here they were at my roots once more, where the weightlessness of time seemed to pause its relentless march for just this moment, while hearts beating as one against life's ebb and flow beneath stars that had silently witnessed countless such reunions before their own began with whispers shared between souls. "I remember," Edward murmured, his voice a tender echo of nostalgia laced through the night air, "the day we first discovered this place, towed for a discovery not merely in name, but one that seemed to be destiny itself." His eyes brimmed with stories, untold as they sought out Jonathan's gaze. The lines around his jaw spoke volumes of laughter and life, lived fiercely under the warmth of sunlit afternoons, while Jonathan's smile held a map etched by experiences that had sculpted him into this very being or confluence where their individual rivers met to become an ocean. As fireflies began twirling around them like celestial dancing partners in the darkness above, I felt my rings absorb every pulse of shared humanity and emotion between these two kindred spirits who had learned from me more about love's essence than any book might ever impart. It was within this living testament, where they found solace or place, that seemed untouched by time's fickle hand, a sanctuary of memory forged in the heartwood and soul soil beneath my sprawling roots. Throughout their journey across lands kissed by foreign soils and cultures woven into broader societal tapestries, where Jonathan had once stood on pulsing stages to voice ideals that echoed through crowds, where Edward's hands trembled not with age, but the weight of unfulfilled dreams now sated at their feet in my shade. They knew well how seasons shape lives and memories, akin to leaves which dance upon gusty winds before returning home once more beneath this same boughs, where they had tasted both bitter winter's chill on bare skin and summer's embrace as warmth seeped into their marrow. Their essence, a symbiotic blend of laughter that resonated through my limbs like the joyful peal of bells after rain clouds have passed, and whispers soft enough to be carried away by morning dew upon petals in bloom at dawn's first light. This was their sanctuary. I, an ancient observer rooted deep within earthen womb and skyward questor towards the canopy's embrace above us all, had become a testament not just to time but humanity itself, for a chronicle of life, where each wrinkle upon Jonathan's face was inscribed with tales only they could share. As Edward caressed his beloved companion along her cheek in quiet admiration for the journey shared and yet untold, I sensed a final chapter approaching, to be penned not by human hands, but through touches of life interwoven like vines around their story of narrative that had never needed penning. For as they lay there entangled amidst my roots in nature's cradle, where time seemed only an illusion, I realized the true anchor was love itself, unwavering and everlasting through seasons of change, a steadfast presence to which this couple remained tethered, forever intertwined like ivy on ancient stone. The stars overhead twinkled approval as they surrendered themselves into dreams, where I cradle them in my shade each night, until the sun's first light heralds a new chapter to be lived and loved upon this earth's bosom, or journey of souls together beneath an ever-watchful eye. And when morning broke on their as dawn's tender light began to paint the edges of their world with hues of gold and roseate tones, Jonathan stirred beneath my bough-size heart, thrumming in harmony with a rhythmic rustle that whispered through leaves like an ancient lullaby. Edward stood beside him quietly now, his face awash with shadows from the night's passage, yet still etched with traces of their shared dreamscape, where adventures unfurled beneath my canopy and time wove its silent tapestry around them both. "I love you," Jonathan murmured into Edward's ear as they lay entwined, his breath a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves above him in response to their tender sentiment. The words felt like seeds of hope planted firmly within fertile soil, promises destined not just for growth but also blossoming with each beat of Jonathan's heart and every sigh from Edward's lips, a testament that even as seasons changed and years waned into memories, their love would remain evergreen. Edward nodded against his chest, where the softness of her skin lingered like dew upon morning grass, or sensation so intimate yet universally known to bring forth tears in one's eyes when cradled by nature's gentle hand alone. It was here, within my foliage-festooned embrace and under a sky that bore witnesses, through generations of sunrises past, they agreed upon the morrow, together at last amidst verdant fields where legacies lay buried as deep roots in soil steeped with stories untold. Jonathan chuckled softly when Edward playfully tugged on a tendril that wrapped around his ankle, an echo of mirth born from the innocence their union held within its core, undimmed by years or dulled in spirit over time's ceaseless march. With every touch under my sheltering arms and limbs extending like welcoming hands, to guard against daylight's intrusion upon this sacred space they claimed as solely their own, a haven where dreams could flourish unfettered by the world beyond our leafy enclade's edge. As light began its ascendancy, Jonathan reached for Edward with a tenderness that belied his rugged exterior. Each muscle folded beneath layers of fabric spoke volumes about their shared journeys through valleys carved from trials and triumph alike, fair laughter ringing as clear in my leaves, rustling chorus when joy colored the air like sunlight upon dew-kissed petals. Amidst a symphony of bird songs heralding day's approach, Edward whispered secrets to his beloved that only love could disclose, her mosaic crafted from every emotion they had ever dared express in the quiet hours spent under my watchful gaze, hopes like delicate butterflies alight upon willing nectar-bearing blooms, fears folded neatly away with care akin to tucking children into bed at night. Jonathan's heart, now full and brimming beneath layers of tender affection for Edward's unwavering presence in his life, beat out soft rhythmic assurances that promised the perpetual flowering of trust between their souls. Her vow as constant to him as my annual rings mark time within this ancient trunk. And when morning's first golden threads spun through our canopy's tapestry and illuminated Jonathan's face with a warmth that mirrored the sunrise itself, he whispered of their parting, or sigh between two hearts beating in unison as they stood ready to step forward into tomorrow together. Edward wrapped an arm around his waist where laughter lines cradled promises etched deep within skin kissed by countless dawns and dusks alike. He shared a smile that held the wisdom of sunsets, yet, seen, knowing well how love much like my roots beneath, this very ground would continue to stretch forth into endless horizons, with each leafy breath drawn between them as they prepared for their journey beyond our sacred threshold and under an awakening sky that promised renewal with every sunrise. Jonathan's hands found solace in Edward's steady ones, where once fingers had sought mine on embracer's silent oath to carry forward the legacy of love birth amid my boughs. Thus did they venture forth into daybreak together as one, their path unfurling like new leaves upon a branch toward light and life beyond. Yet, forever cradled within memories, Jonathan had always found comfort here. His heart beat to the cadence of nature's own ridden sway. My branches swayed with every breath, and how our shared laughter seemed like a melody carried on summer wings that danced through me each season without fail or fear. Edward too sought refuge in these moments when he felt most alive, here under this ancient sentinel of the forest where his love for Jonathan had first blossomed, nurtured by countless sunsets and shared joys as they grew together like saplings reaching toward the sky's warmth with every passing year. Their connection was a testament to an enduring affection that mirrored my own resilience through storms and seasons alike, your bond not easily severed, even by time's relentless march forward. Jonathan would often trace his fingers over the scars upon Edward's hands, as they had once done in their youth. These lines were remnants of adventures embarked on together that left them weather-beaten yet unfalteringly strong, like me, standing sentinel through countless autumns. As twilight enveloped the day and stars began to punctuate the night sky like precious gems strewn upon velvet darkness, Jonathan's thoughts turned inward as he considered their impending journey into a future where every step forward would be taken hand in hand with Edward. They had always dreamt of Fisser, life unfettered by constraints and unshackled from the past that sometimes sought to bind them like ivy upon my trunk. The final chapter in their shared narrative under your boughs was drawing near, as Jonathan's heart whispered with a yearning for new horizons, while his soul ached at leaving behind this sanctuary of intertwined memories and eternal promises that had blossomed within the shade you provided. Edward understood. He too felt an echo in their hearts, a resonance between two lives forever altered by experiences shared beneath your majestic presence, a testament to love's ability to transcend even time itself as my roots delve deeper into earth's embrace with every passing century. And then came the morning when Jonathan and Edward emerged from slumber, a day dawning upon them like any other, yet undeniably different. For today they would set forth on a journey together that was to be penned in their history as indelibly as my annual rings marked time within your ancient trunk. As the sunlight first kissed Jonathan's cheeks and reflected back into Edward's eyes with an intensity of warmth unmatched by summer rays, they shared a knowing look or silent acknowledgment that this was to be their final chapter under your protective cover before embarking on life beyond. The air seemed alive as Jonathan spoke softly yet firmly about the partings ahead. Edward listened intently, with each word weaving itself into his heart like golden threads in a tapestry of sunlight and dew-kissed mornings that had always been their shared canvas and everlasting backdrop to life's unfolding drama beneath your watchful gaze. "It's time," Jonathan said, as the very essence of his being resonated with a clarity born from years spent within these sacred thresholds and under countless skies that had witnessed their love in all its hues, from passionate whispers to tender caresses like leaves cradled by wind. Edward's heart responded. It was time indeed for him as well, though the thought of parting came with a twinge reminiscent of autumn's final leaf reluctantly releasing its hold on your branches before succumbing to gravity and journeying downward toward rest. A tender smile graced Edward's lips, a reflection not just of gratitude for all the seasons shared, but also a recognition that life, much like nature itself, was an eternal cycle of growth and release. Roots must stretch forth into new soils while treasured leaves returned to feed. Jonathan and Edward stood side by side on a quiet evening as dusk began to settle over their quaint village, painting it in hues of gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop for one final shared moment before Jonathan departed abroad with his newfound responsibilities. Their gazes met across the cobblestone path that wound through town like a ribbon tying them to years gone by. Each step taken together seemed laden with memories, but also hopeful strides toward future horizons yet unseen and destinies not fully embraced. The gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from Mrs. Thompson's garden down this very path they walked so often, a sweet reminder that life's perfume is richest just before it transitions, a prelude to change and renewal like dawn chasing away night's shadowy shroud. Edward reached out his hand tenderly as if he might grasp Jonathan through time itself. The touch was light, but laden with unspoken promises or silent vow that while their physical proximity may wane, a bond forged in warmth and shared laughter would endure beyond this chapter of partings. Their journey took them to Edward's childhood home, where they often sought solace from the world's clamor. Here was his sanctuary, a place that had cradled their young hearts as steadfastly as it nurtured timbers into grand oaks, each ring within these walls an echo of laughter and whispers shared in confidence. Jonathan's eyes traced along the familiar woodwork before resting upon a corner where two antique armchairs sat parallel, silent witnesses to countless evenings spent unfolding tales by candlelight or unraveling each other's dreams under stolid canvases, their silhouettes fading into night's embrace as if they too were fleeting. Amidst the treasured silence of Edward's home lay a grandfather clock, its pendulum swayed with an unwavering rhythm that had measured moments both minute and monumental, like it was counting down to this very instance when past met future in tender suspense. Jonathan paused before its face as if he might pause time itself. His reflection caught briefly between the glass, a poignant reminder of how quickly seasons transitioned from budding springs into silent autumns where leaves turned golden and fell one by one to rest upon earthen beds below their feet. They moved toward a window that looked out over Edward's garden. It was there they sat as twilight deepened its inky cloak across the sky, a shared tableau of fading light kissing dew-kissed petals and emerald fronds swaying to an invisible symphony. Jonathan spoke words dipped in gratitude, a warmth that wrapped around Edward like his favorite shawl on brisk mornings. It was the melody he had come home for, a tune of farewells not spoken with sorrow but punctuated by love's enduring cadence. "Remember," Jonathan began as they rose from their seats, "the strength you found in each other is now a beacon to guide your paths forward." Edward nodded. He knew that while the heart might pause its rhythm at times of change, it was always capable of resuming with more vigor and vitality, like saplings drawing life-giving sustenance from rich soil after winter's rest. As they left his childhood home behind like shadows receding into memory's embrace, Edward felt a twinge in the corners of his heart where partings met promises. He understood that as their hands had once entwined with youthful exuberance around everyday joys and shared hardships alike, they would not be apart for long. Time was but an illusion when measured against love's enduring constancy, a force more constant than the northern star in night's firmament. The journey from Edward's doorstep to Jonathan's awaited them as they walked back into town. It was just another day marked by departures, but also one where their souls felt lighter, a shared release that carried with it a gentle strength, like the sun casting its first ray upon new leaves after seasons of rest. Their silhouettes merged and split against shop windows as they traversed familiar streets once more. Each step was an acknowledgment, not just to what had been, but also to tomorrow's unscripted verses that awaited their penmanship, ink still wet with possibility yet drying under time's relentless march. As they neared Jonathan's home once more, its white picket fence standing sentinel at its front, a symbol of their shared histories interwoven with countless tales, both mundane and significant, Edward felt an embrace in his chest where the weight of years seemed to lift. The sun had begun her ascent. It was time for them to bid farewell once again, until morning's light would break upon a new day, their promises renewed with each passing hour under its gentle watchfulness. Their hands met briefly by his doorstep as if the very touch could summon forth old dreams and rekindle hopes unspent before slumber claimed them both once more. They shared one last look over their shoulders, a glance that spoke of silent understandings deeper than words. Edward was ready to step through those familiar wooden panels into his own abode for the night, while Jonathan would return thereafter with tales and laughter from the world beyond town's gentle humming heartbeat. Tonight they had decided not just on a simple exchange of pleasantries, but on creating memories that could be revisited like beloved tomes nestled upon shelves or testament to their enduring bond through seasons both joyous and trying alike. They spoke softly under the watchful eyes of stars about plans for little adventures yet unexplored, each one more exciting than the last as they allowed themselves a freedom found only in dreams. Edward recounted stories he had always wanted to share, but never dared with Jonathan's eager ear-size youth spent by lakeside and fields under vast skies where friendship was forged between fireflies dance. Jonathan, ever the listener, turned confident as they shared secrets of past loves lost like fading echoes in canyons wind-whispered with stories untold how his heart had been captured by a lady fair and bold from distant shores, tales where Edward would find himself both anchor and compass, guiding him through storms as if they were but light rains upon the garden of their youth. With every shared memory, another layer peeled back between them, revealed a tapestry woven with threads silvered by time's passing hand that still gleamed strong beneath its touch. It was in these moments that Jonathan saw himself not just as Edward's friend, but a part he had always needed to be. The night deepened, and the moon shared her pale glow between them, like two old friends catching up on years of solitude apart, a reminder of their own enduring presence amidst change's relentless current that surged through life's great river. They spoke not just with voices, but in hearts communed by a language only understood where the heartbeats aligned to create melodies older than time itself. As Edward opened his door beneath Jonathan, he thought of tomorrow, or day when both would stand as pillars against seasons, marching drum, and find solace within each other's embrace. They had learned that even amidst changes ebb and flow the essence remained constant, like a lighthouse beam piercing fog-clad shores. With an affection renewed by shared moments, their promises were not just spoken, but live, a vow to return as surely come dawn, when daybreak would once again paint life's canvas with hues of possibility, and love's unyielding constancy that bound them beyond the horizon where night gave way to sunrise. And so they parted, Edward stepping back into his own world or haven now slightly less silent without Jonathan's presence. But in their hearts was a quietude born of knowing another day had passed just as before, yet different too, for each soul carried forward its unique journey, while two friends remained forever intertwined like the roots beneath ancient trees that weather countless storms and still stand tall against time's passage. And with thoughts heavy on Jonathan's heart, he closed his door behind him, night outside beckoning tales of tomorrow to unfold as they waited for each other in life's grand tapestry where love was both anchor and compass through every season known. It wasn't merely a goodbye, but the promise that with sunrise would come another hello, their footsteps marking time not just upon earth. Beneath them walked daily paths of return to one another, a journey as eternal as friendship itself. Their silhouettes stood against his window-sill for an instant longer than necessary. It was a final gesture before they slipped away like smoke caught in daylight's embrace, until their next meeting at the Dorns' first light would greet them once more, a continuation of stories, laughter filled in chapter 16 of Edward and Jonathan's intertwined lives, which unfolded like a delicate tapestry woven through with threads of daily routines and shared moments both mundane and profoundly touching. Dawn crept over the horizon as if to embrace them in its rosy hues. The night had been particularly warm for this time of year, lending an almost tangible sense of togetherness between Edward's home, where he stood by his window watching two silhouettes fade away into morning's first light, and Jonathan's abode across the street that now felt emptier than ever. Edward found comfort in knowing their friendship would endure beyond this night, for every sunrise promised not only a new day, but also countless opportunities to reconnect with his old friend, each meeting as predictable and cherished as clockwork, yet somehow never less special because of its frequency or the passage of time. The world buzzed around them in their wakeful hours, oblivious to Edward's heart aching slightly at Jonathan's absence. Still, he allowed himself a small smile for his friend's strength and resilience that seemed even more apparent during these moments apart. Jonathan had been up all night before this parting, her habit born of youthful restlessness turned into an adult's compassionate care when Edward needed solace after losing someone dear to him years ago, a loss he never quite overcame despite the passage of time and seasons. His heart still carried that weight like his father's before him had done with hers, but as dawn approached, so did Jonathan's resolve not just to honor their friendship's depth, but also its enduring nature through even greater acts of kindness towards others, or promise he made silently in the privacy of night. As Edward watched his friend disappear into a day filled with both challenges and joys, memories flooded back, laughter echoing around them as they would sit by their favorite spot on Riverside Park bench under summer stars. Quiet evenings spent sharing stories over mugs, steaming hot chocolate in Jonathan's cozy living room during the long winter nights when snow blanketed everything except for two friends, curled up together with a film or book to accompany them, their presence enough warmth. He thought of that summer evening where they had found themselves lost near an ancient oak in their local forest preserve. As if fate itself conspired against mere Hewins attempting hiking without maps and guides, Edward took Jonathan's hand when he saw the look on his friend's face, a mix of uncertainty about which path to take next. They wandered aimlessly for what seemed an eternity, but turned out being only a few hours in this world where time slipped through fingers like sands and was shaped by experiences more than clocks or calendars dictated its flow. Jonathan's hand felt strong, steady even when fear crept up Edward's spine as he wondered if they would ever find their way out of the woods. Their laughter had been a beacon then, and no an enduring sound that resonated between them in dreamy echoes through every heartbeat. For Jonathan it was both salve on painful memories and celebration during times when life's gifts were abundant, like the day he found Edward atop his beloved oak tree as a child, again their bond deepening with each visit to those ancient trees that stood watch over countless generations. Through all their shared moments, Jonathan had learned from old wisdom whispered by nature itself. Life's beauty and pain were intricately linked, like the roots of an oak tree, joy rooted deeply within sorrow, if one dared to look beneath surface scars or bark-like memories. And so he sought refuge in painting, her hobby which brought colors that reflected his inner emotions onto canvas, creating landscapes where sunsets melt into mountainsides and forests emerged from sea foam. Art became both an escape when the world felt too heavy on Jonathan's heart, or a bridge to share with Edward during rare glimpses they had together over time. As morning deepened its hold, bringing light that seemed almost hesitant at first before fully stepping into daytime glory, Edward knew their journey wasn't one of just footprints in the sand, but also paths trodden through minds and souls intertwined. As much a part of each other's life stories were shared secrets whispered only beneath moonlight on nights when they camped out beside lakes teeming with fishes, or simply lay under open skies listening to symphonies played as Jonathan's brushstrokes danced with a rhythm born of countless nights spent beneath starlit canopies. He captured within his painting an ethereal scene, a lone figure sitting atop a hillside under the watchful gaze of ancient oaks. The trees in this particular landscape were not just symbols, but silent guardians to Jonathan's memories, with Edward a memory that began as shared sunsets and evolved into something far more profound, like ivy intertwining its way through history's soaped bark. Their encounters had become a tapestry of experiences where even the most fleeting moments were threaded together by an unspoken connection between two souls yearning to express themselves beyond words. The bond they shared was not just one forged in companionship, but also through understanding and empathy, born out of times spent alone as well moments when silence became their language, allowing Jonathan's thoughts about Edward's absence from his life during the daytime to surface gently like morning mist. Within this artwork was a landscape that transitioned seamlessly between elements of nature and encounters with each other, where waterfalls mirrored cascades in their laughter, forests echoed whispers shared only under moonbeams' caress, and mountains stood as steadfast sentries to the secrets they had kept. As Jonathan added his final touches, a solitary candle flickering against a backdrop of twilight purples, giving way to indigo nights where stars seemed closer than ever before, felt Edward's presence more acutely, if only in shared dreamscapes and the art that bore witness. In this painting, titled Twilight Reflections, Jonathan sought not just an end, but a beginning of sorts. He envisioned it hanging prominently at their favorite Kaffir place where they had first met over steaming cups, surrounded by patrons lost in the mundane. It would be there that Edward could see the storytelling within each stroke and understand Jonathan's emotional odyssey without a single word needing to bridge between them. Jonathan often found himself visiting this favorite spot on weekends when he felt most alone, his mind adrift in thoughts of their shared history, as well as what lay ahead or future that seemed like an unopened book whose pages were coated with a patina of uncertainty and hope for something more. The painting would not only serve to remind Edward, but also stand as Jonathan's testament. It was his way of saying, "Here lies the essence of us." On one such visit during an especially mellow twilight hour, when daylight reluctantly yielded its throne and night took precedent in a symphony composed by crickets and rustling leaves outside, Jonathan waited as though time had paused to ensure he was not alone, for even the most frequent of his visits seemed solitary affairs amidst casual chatter around him at this beloved caff that smelled perpetually like freshly ground coffee beans, mingled with a hint of worn leather and old books. As evening turned to night and shadows grew longer, Jonathan's mind was often adrift in days spent to brightened by Edward's company, yet tinged with the melancholy that came from knowing he could not share this bond as freely when they were apart. These thoughts became part of his artwork. Each hue represented a different facet of their relationship, blending warmth and coolness like yin and yang, inseparable within him despite distance or time's passage between them. The next day promised the arrival of an invitation, an event that would require Jonathan to travel far beyond his familiar haunts. This occasion was Edward's sister's wedding, a celebration where he knew their paths might cross for reasons unforeseen and potentially transformative, like seasons shifting unexpectedly. Amidst the excitement of anticipation mixed with nervousness lay an undercurrent that Jonathan could not fully grasp. It felt as though every step toward this event was also towards something unknown, a destination where he hoped to share his painting in person for Edward's perusal, and maybe even find answers or closure. As night after night unfolded into days filled with laughter shared over cups of coffee that warmed their hands against the chill outside, a reminder of seasons turn as they navigated through life together, Jonathan began to sketch out ideas for a new painting inspired by Edward's sister and her wedding. He planned intricate patterns in his mind, motifs reflecting unity amidst diversity, just like their friendship had become with the trio over time. As Jonathan's brush danced across his canvas with renewed purpose, and as Edward's wedding invitation laid crisp on his desk, a strange tranquility settled over him, a calm that whispered of change yet soothes like an unseen breeze. The colors he used to represent the warmth in their friendship now took new forms, amber hues intertwined with azure blues and specks of verdant greens, each a testament to years spent apart but bound by shared experiences that seemed almost tangible beneath his fingertips. The canvas grew alive under Jonathan's steady-handed depiction not only of Edward's sister on her wedding day, but also the unspoken emotions between them, a visual sonnet written in pigment and passion. It was in homage to their bond that had endured many seasons, yet seemed as fresh today as when it began under springtime skies, with laughter echoing through sunlit fields. Edward's invitation served not just as a call for social gathering, but also, unbeknownst to Jonathan himself, the first thread of reconciliation that had begun weaving its way into his hearter connection he sought desperately without realizing it until now. As days slipped by and Edward's wedding drew nearer on the horizon like a sunset fading beyond distant mountains, hope began to blossom within Jonathan's chest just as flowers bloomed under warm April showers after long winter barrenness. In his mind's eye he saw them walking hand in hand through an autumnal forest of rustling amber leaves, the air filled with mirth and music, a vision so vivid that Jonathan had to smile despite not having been there for years. At Edward's sister-in-law's wedding reception, held at a grand country estate just as lush in foliage as it was rich in joviality, the artwork would find its true purpose, his gifted painting intended to bridge souls across oceans of absence and time. Jonathan's brush strokes now carried not only a celebration but also an invitation and overture that beckoned Edward back into their shared world with the delicate hope he had never allowed himself to entertain until this moment's subtle begin-zeroing stirring within him. He poured his silent prayers and unresolved yearnings onto canvas, seeking not just approval but a rekindling of something once cherished, now dimmed by silence between them like candles flickering in the draught. The wedding day arrived, a bright beacon on Jonathan's calendar that had seemed both an escape from and confrontation with his emotional landscape, as he considered it all week leading up to Edward's sister-in-law's joyous union. He imagined himself there in the crowd, where smiles were shared like currency. Yet amidst this tapestry of celebration stood Jonathan alone on a path that might lead him back into Edward's orbiter journey he had longed to embark upon without knowing it would come when least expected and most desired. His painting completed, the image now fully realized in color and form seemed ready for display outside his studio door as if awaiting its master's touch. Jonathan felt compelled by an unseen guide that nudged him towards a crossroads of choice, comfort, of familiarity, or embracing change, like leaves turning their faces to the sun. As he packed, placing each brush and palette into his travel case with reverence as if they were sacred talismans against doubt, Jonathan felt an inner shift. Perhaps it was time for him, too, to open up once more to welcome Edward back, not only through art but also in life's shared journey. With the sun casting its last golden hour glow upon his work and a heart that had found unexpected solace amidst uncertainty, Jonathan closed his studio door behind him as quietly as he'd begun this chapter of painting, first step towards mending what time and distance could not fray entirely apart. The next day would bring the wedding to life before his eyes in more ways than one. It was a canvas vast with joyous revelry, but perhaps for Jonathan there awaited something even grander, an unexpected reunion of souls under banners woven from shared threads and memories once thought lost. As night after restless night yielded to the promise of new beginnings on his travels toward Edward's distant home, a part of Jonathan carried with him not just art but also dreams that stretched beyond horizons where he had long been blind. As Jonathan's hands steadied his brushstrokes with renewed vigor under the soft glow of twilight, he could feel a sense of closure embracing him like an old friend after years apart. The last touches on Edward's portrait seemed to imbue life into it, eyes that flickered not just pigment, but echoes from shared laughter and whispered secrets, as if they were inseparable companions through time's relentless march forward. The studio door, now closed behind him for the final time before his journey began anew with Edward at its heart, held no bittersweet farewell. Instead, it opened to a future painted in hues of hope and possibility, a promise etched into every stroke on canvas that spoke not just artistry but humanity's enduring capacity to heal. With the first light peeking through his window as Jonathan prepared for departure, memories danced before him like spectres at a silent ball. Edward's mischievous grin when they had hidden in plain sight during college pranks, their shared silences that spoke volumes on rainy evenings spent reading poetry under the soft hum of streetlights. These were not mere shadows, but luminaries guiding him towards reconnection, reminding Jonathan why his heart yearned for Edward's presence beyond canvas and color. The journey would be more than a physical crossing from London to Edinburgh. It was an odyssey toward the mending of spirits that had been inadvertently freed by life's capricious turns, faithfully intertwined through their shared artistic souls, now on paths diverged too far for mere words. As Jonathan folded his travel case close with a gentle sigh, He imagined Edward's receptive smile upon seeing the portrait that encapsulated more than just an artist's talent, but also life lessons learned in silence and soliloquy alike, a love letter to times past. The anticipation of meeting again made Jonathan feel lighter with each step toward his train station, where Edward would await him like a second homecoming under the sun's watchful eye that had seen them both through seasons. Change from youth into maturity, and beyond expectation towards old age and back to art once more. The platform offered an unlikely sanctuary for reflections, as Jonathan watched couples, weaving in and out of his thoughts, their shared glances a silent acknowledgment of the journey's emotional landscape he now navigated with Edward at its core. The train whistle heralded not just departure, but also reawakening start of an expedition wherein each other's company would reignite joys long dimmed by time and distance, to be reclaimed peace by delicate brushstroke of memory's resurrection on canvas renewed. Jonathan felt the familiar tug at his heartstrings as he boarded her, sensation once foreign now comfortingly nostalgic with Edward's presence in mind, knowing that their shared story was about to be continued anew under a sky promising blue houris and golden sunsets alike. With every mile traversed by the rhythmic chug of steel on rail, Jonathan's spirit wove itself deeper into tapestries unbound by time or expectation, for in this journey he found not just Edward, but also himself, an artist reborn through rediscovery and a soul refreshed with shared experiences as his guide. As the landscape blurred past window panes, Jonathan surrendered to sleep's embrace on train seats that felt like old friends once more, in dreamscapes where Edward's handshake awaited him an echo of reality yet not entirely saw a bridge between worlds beyond mere proximity. These were visions spun from the loom of hope and artistry, crafting a narrative far richer than any oil on canvas could hold alone. It was life itself rendered in strokes bold with love's indelible mark upon its essence, a reunion, not just anticipated, but artistically ordained. The journey continued under night's watchful gaze, stars above mirroring the golden hour of Jonathan's London studio where Edward had once stood beside him. His heart held a constellation patterned with hope and reconciliation as he awaited their reunion on Scottish soil or canvas far grander than any painting hung within walls that housed masterpieces. Edward's arrival would not just be physical but transformative, for in him lay the missing chapters of Jonathan's story yet to unfold, a tale where art and life merged into one another as seamlessly as brush meets canvas, where every shared Edward's arrival in Scotland was heralded by a gentle Scottish breeze that seemed to whisper tales of old as it swept through his open window, carrying with it an earthy center prelude to their reunion. The mornings were cooler here, and the sun rose later, but stretched its warmth longer into the day's embrace than in London's perpetual rush-hour haze. Edward stepped off the train with a heart full of anticipation. He took measured strides towards his destination, a quaint cottage nestled among rolling green hills where Jonathan had spent many an evening, lost within paint and pigment, as if in prayer to beauty itself. The path was lined with wildflowers whose colors seemed brighter here without the city's gray veil overhead. Each step felt like a note leading him closer not just geographically but emotionally towards his past self rediscovered, toward Jonathan reborn through their shared journey of art and life melding into one another. The cottage stood as if it had been waiting for centuries to become the sanctuary that Edward's arrival made manifest. Its walls bore witness to countless stories etched within them, scent of wood smoke, coffee grounds in a pot simmered with butter and flour mingled into an inviting homey aroma. The door opened without knocking, as if the air itself had become too loud for human sounds. Edward was welcomed by Jonathan's warm smile that greeted him like old friends reuniting after years apart, not just in physical space but across time and heart space, where each brush stroke he laid upon his palette seemed to dance with hope's vibrant colors. As evening approached, Edward found himself at the dining table, a long wooden affair that had once been Jonathan's workstation for creating worlds on canvas. Here they would share stories and memories over a simple dinner of homemade pie as candlelight flickered across faces lined with laughter lines from years spent in joyful creation. As the day waned, conversations ebbed into silence punctuated only by sips of tea or cup that had been brewed precisely at noon, when time seemed to stand still and two friends would often lose themselves for hours discussing dreams instead of reality's rigid constraints as they stood before canvases wide open, each stroke a question asked aloud in the language only artists could speak. Under knee 0637825 chapter content.jpg Edward and NBSB wore his heart on sleeve tonight, his dreams and aspirations laid bare for Jonathan to see as he traced lines of future plans with Hope's guiding hand, drawing upon the experiences that had shaped both their beings. The room was charged not just by electricity, but by an energy born from artistry itself. A place where time seemed irrelevant or studio in Edward's mind became Jonathan's London cottage once more as they discussed plans for exhibitions and shared visions of what the future might hold, their conversations flowing like watercolors blending on wet paper before them. Jonathan reached out to touch a portrait that hung proudly above his workstation or painting where Edward's silhouette melded with shadows cast by flickering candlelight. It was the visual echo of their friendship, one they had both cherished and nurtured in equal measure. Together, as twilight deepened outside, Jonathan's hands found those of his old friend to guide them through a dance or waltz across canvases that felt like homecoming. Edward's hand returned the gesture with familiarity only known between souls reacquainted after time apart. As nighttime cloaked their world in velvet darkness, illuminated by stars and firelight's glow within the cottage, Jonathan shared tales of his solitary journeys through art as Edward spoke softly into dreamscapes about life beyond canvases. They discovered that while paintings might capture moments eternalized on linen threads, it was their friendship or living portrait constantly evolving with each day and brushstroke that held the true essence of timeless connection. They discussed how Edward's experiences in Scotland had not just shifted his perspective but altered him entirely. He who once sought refuge from London's relentless pace now found harmony within its rolling green hills, where art was inspired by nature as much as it reflected inner worlds or balance between the external and internal landscapes. Together they imagined a future mural upon which their friendship would be immortal as Jonathan and Edward's fingers wove stories upon canvases in sync with each other's heartbeat. A sense of profound peace settled within them both, a tranquil silence that spoke volumes about their shared journey through artistry intertwined with life itself. The cottage they found themselves in at the edge of town seemed to breathe along with them, its ancient timbers resonating warmly underfoot, as though approving silently of this sacred union amid paint and memories within four walls that had seen decades pass like seasons outside their door. The night stretched before Jonathan much longer than he could have anticipated. His eyelids grew heavy, draping down to cover the windows in a soft darkness until only slivers of light from candles flickered across canvases that bore witness to conversations and laughter now just echoes. Edward's voice became like velvet as he recounted adventures on distant Scottish moors where time seemed suspended, or place so alien yet familiar, a world painted with greens more vibrant than any palette could offer. Jonathan listened intently, his eyes tracing the lines of calligraphy Edward's hands had created in mimicry to their storytelling waltz as they spoke. Each word was like an artist's stroke on canvas, purposeful and full of intention. It wasn't until Jonathan lifted himself from his seat, easing out into the cool night air beyond cottage walls, that he realized how deeply Edward had embedded their friendship within him since childhood days spent in London parks with canvases as confidants between them both, or shared sanctuary where dreams and reality met halfway. The brushstrokes they'd painted during those times weren't just on canvas, but etched into the very core of their beings. Vibrant yellows for sunlit afternoons spent in Edward's grandmother's garden, or somber blues reflecting silent understandings exchanged between them under Newham skies. As Jonathan walked back inside, his heart felt as if it had been dipped into colors from the very artworks they'd created, or spectrum of emotions painting their bond with every step he took across worn wooden floorboards that creaked like old bones remembering times gone by, yet still strong and alive within. He returned to Edward's side, whispered his gratitude for this unparalleled sense of belonging in the world they'd come to understand so deeply, a place where art wasn't just a backdrop, but as vital an element of their shared experiences as any physical setting could ever hope to be. The two men found themselves drawn once more before canvases that seemed like old friends, and together revisited scenes from Edward's Scottish tales with brushes they had coaxed into life years ago, when youth was on the cusp of its inevitable ebbing tide. Each painting held secrets within layers of oil paints much as their friendship did. It felt almost magical, this ability to step back through time and revisit these moments with such vivid clarity that Jonathan could still smell the salt from sea-swept cliffs or taste honeyed tea in a sun-dappled cottage by an emerald loch's edge. As morning light began its reluctant ascent, casting long shadows across their work of art and heartbeats alike, Jonathan spoke softly about dreaming to paint the future mural or collaboration that would weave together threads from each other's life stories in a way that not even time could unravel. Edward's voice joined his with ideas as wildflowers might bloom across an unforgiving heath. It was here, amid laughter and dreaming about the mural they had yet to create, a testament of their friendship solidified through shared experiences in art that transcended mere visual representation, that Jonathan realized just how complete this chapter felt. Their dialogue wove like golden threads across a tapestry as Edward mused on visions where landscapes and seascapes intertwined with the human heart's depth, tales of Scotland's rugged beauty, echoing in canyons carved by rivers much younger than he or any man alive, for that matter. As Jonathan listened to his friend paint this narrative across blank spaces on a fresh canvas before them both, it was as though Edward summoned the very essence of their friendship into being with every stroke. Together they shared not just art and anecdotes, but souls laid bare upon linen for all eternity. As Jonathan prepared to retire beneath covers woven from in chapter 22, as moonlight filtered softly through Edward's studio window and painted silver halos upon their canvases resting in silence on easels, by nightfall Jonathan felt a twinge of something new stirring within his chest, nostalgia intertwined with anticipation. The two friends had always been bound not just to the physicality that art demanded, but also its temporal and emotional layers, which they now began unraveling through their shared dreamscape mural projector venture transcending time itself, encapsulating every laughter-filled night in Blithwood Manor's hallowed rooms, wherein Edward had once been a young apprentice. As the evening crept into twilight and shadows grew longer against their walls of creation, Jonathan found himself recalling days long past, when his mentor's tales brought forth visions that made him feel as though he were touching history through brushstroke after precious brushstroke, or connection to times both mundane and majestic. It was Edward who had first spoken these dream-forged images aloud, a gift from the depth of his imagination, which Jonathan now felt compelled to preserve and paint upon this shared canvas that seemed as if it could never be complete, with its everlasting narrative thread spun between friends since childhood days spent under Blithwood's ancient oaks. Tonight, however, Edward's hands moved almost of their own accord across the fresh fabric before them, at testament to a friendship that had always been as much about shared soulfulness and understanding as it was brushes on canvas or pigment upon parchment, his tales no longer merely stories but an invitation for Jonathan's hand itself. As Edward conjured visions of Scottish cliffs where mist embraced the sea, he spoke not only with words which in turn became colors and shapes that danced before them on canvas like fireflies caught just long enough to be seen by watchful eyes beneath twilight skies, but also through a language beyond speech, one which whispered of unseen worlds where art could transcend time, touch souls across ages. "Do you feel it too?" Edward asked in hushed tones that seemed almost reverent as he spoke about the landscapes they were capturing, their shared history painted on this expansive backdrop of creativity, a place where every texture and tone was imbued with personal significance, each representing moments not just seen through eyes, but felt deep within beating hearts. "This mural will live beyond us," Edward said as he dipped his brush in cerulean blue to capture the essence of Blithwood's very own Lake Lomond, a lake that had been etched into their memories alongside tales told by generations before them, at timeless feature within an ever-changing world. The two friends worked side by side in silence, yet with hearts full and minds speaking volumes as they embarked on this communal artistic journey, a project that promised to immortalize their bond just as surely as it preserved the essence of Blithwood's natural beauty, a place where Edward had been taken at first sight by its rugged landscapes, which he then conveyed with such vigour and passion in every stroke upon his canvas. Jonathan found himself lost within these shared reveries. Each memory conjured a visceral response as deep-seated emotions surfaced from wells of the past or place where time seemed to stand still amidst tales woven through generations, yet felt so immediate and palpable in Edward's recounting, as they blended colours that sang with history upon their shared canvas, bold and yellows mimicking sunsets over Blithwood Glen or sombre greys to represent winter's touch or season when the land lay hushed under a blanket of snow, as if nature itself paused in homage for moments so fleeting yet cherished by those who had walked these paths before them. They both felt themselves stepping backward through time with each brushstroke, Edward's tales and Jonathan's own experiences coming to life upon the fabric that stretched between their easels, a canvas where they painted not only landscapes, but also love stories or testament of friendship which had grown roots so deep in Blithwood Manor it seemed as if its very foundations were imbued with echoes from centuries past. Their brushwork became meditative, the act itself a ritual inviting them to step into worlds born within dreamscapes where time flowed differently, or shared vision of Edward's Scottish homeland, teeming with as Jonathan's brush danced across the canvas of memory and imagination. He found himself adrift in Edward's tale's vibrant narrative spun from threads plucked directly from Blithwood Glen itself. The chill air whispered secrets as it rustled through leaves that remained green despite winter's touch, a hushed reverie where every breath seemed to carry the essence of bygone eras. Edward began with anecdotes of old, tales passed down like heirlooms in Blithwood Manor's time-worn Walser Place, that had seen generations come and go as if each newcomer left a mark upon the very stones beneath their feet. He spoke of young lovers who once strolled hand in hand along these paths, hearts beating against one another like synchronized drums under moonlit skies, now silent witnesses to time's relentless march forward, but ever present in this shared reverie they had created together upon the canvas before them. Jonathan's own childhood memories of playing hide-and-seek among ancient oaks, and Edward reminiscing about nights spent listening to his grandmother recount stories by candlelight, each one a thread woven into their tapestry, began to take shape in color. The strokes grew bolder as they delved deeper. The muted earthy greens of Blithwood's expansive meadows, where Edward's ancestors had harvested grain under an amber sky, each kernel a testament to their enduring legacy within these very lands. The sun dipped lower upon the horizon as they painted, its golden fingers caressing the edges of fields and woods that seemed eternal in this tableau where past met present, all enveloped by Edward's spoken history, the echoes of bagpipes drifting through cobbled streets during Blithwood's famed fairs. Here, too, was painted an artist they once knew, a woman with eyes reflecting the depth and beauty found in nature itself, who had inspired them both to seek solace beneath these very trees where time seemed suspended within her gaze upon their shared love for each other's company under the stars' watchful eye. Their brushes moved almost independently as they recounted moments of joy and sorrow alike. Edward describing a widow whose husband had been lost to war's sombre grey cloud that would occasionally pass over this serene landscape, reminding Jonathan how fragile life truly is despite appearances painted by time's hand. Jonathan felt himself pulling back further through the corridors of memory as they depicted a grand estate where Edward's ancestors had hosted gatherings, their laughter and music still resonating in this place that seemed to defy death, its silver mansion shrouded not only by ivy but also by history, its halls echoing with the footfalls of those who danced here before them. They layered strokes upon one another's, Jonathan's vibrant blues and purples for his own Scottish heritage, while Edward interwove golden strands to represent Blithwood Glen, an eternal dance where each hue spoke louder than words, telling tales that transcended time. The night deepened around them. The only sound was their synchronized brushes meeting canvas and shared breaths, between whispers of history recounted in Edward's voice as he spun stories from Blithwood's innate connection to nature, a place where each drop of dew held a secret, every rustling leaf whispered an ancient name. Their painting became more than mere art. It was the sum of their experiences and dreamt-up moments that painted time itself upon this shared canvas at Blithwood Glen. The colors swirled into patterns like old friends catching up on lost years, sharing laughter over tea or tears shed in solitude, at symphony where history's heartbeats were felt through every brushstroke, and words spoken aloud for the first time to an audience of one another alone within this shared dream space. As they continued their labor of love upon canvas embrace, a sense of peace settled over Jonathan like velvet, dusk and understanding, that though he might wander from Blithwood Glen in body, as sleep took him away, The memories and stories born on its soil would remain eternally enshrined within this painted sanctuary. It was here, where history had lived through them, a place of profound connection to each other's past or legacy, not only for themselves, but also those who might one day discover their artwork amongst the air. In chapter 24 of their shared dreamscape at Blithwood Glen, Jonathan and Edward found themselves under a sky wherein stars whispered tales older than time itself, as they continued to bring history alive on canvas, with each other's presence felt in every stroke or testament not only to the bond that had grown between them, but also an ode to their communion of souls. Jonathan's brush moved with a deliberateness born from years spent within Blithwood Glen, where his childhood wanderings came back to him in waves and colors as vibrant memories that seemed just out of reach, until he found Edward's hand guiding it gently. His strokes were tender yet assured, each one weaving into the next like a river finding its course through bedrock, carrying with them stories of his ancestors who had once roamed these very grounds under similar starlit skies, and now lived on in this shared dream space canvas for eternity to see. Edward watched Jonathan's hand move across their grand masterpiece of tapestry that unfolded the rich history intertwined with Blithwood Glen's essence, a place where every leaf had been an ancestor and each dewdrop held memories of generations past. He felt privileged to be part of this legacy. His own brushwork complemented Jonathan's. His touch was delicate yet purposeful as well, adding layers that spoke the language of emotions unspoken between heartbeats when they were alone together in their dreamlike haven, joy and sorrow mingling like oil on water to create a prismatic spectrum. As twilight deepened into night, Jonathan's strokes began with warm hues redolent sunsets of days gone by as he painted the legacy that had brought them together. His brush was an extension of Edward's, thoughts and memories whispered in between breaths when they conversed under this very sky. They worked side by side, their hands moving almost independently, yet honoringly synchronized, to bring forth images so real it felt as though time itself paused momentarily just for them within the glen's embracer, living chronicle that extended back into antiquity and forward towards an endless horizon beyond sight or touch. Edward's brush danced with stories of forgotten loves, lost travelers who had found solace in Blithwood Glen during stormy weather, seeking refuge within its protective embrace. His strokes were richer here, a blend of earth tones and deeper greens that spoke to the soul like an ancient melody played on a harp. Jonathan's hand, still tender with remembrance, painted scenes where love was as perennial in Blithwood Glen as its oldest trees. Their storytelling brushwork intertwined so seamlessly it felt as natural and necessary as the cycle of seasons themselves, a narrative that spanned life zeros within these sacred walls. Their shared canvas became a silent witness to an intimate conversation about life, love, loss, hope rekindled in memory's embrace. Each word spoken by Edward's voice was gently absorbed into the texture of their creation, or dialogue transcending time and echoing through Blithwood Glen as if history itself listened with reverence. They spoke not only to one another, but also seemed heard, felt even when they were alone in this shared dream space. Edward's whispers became Jonathan's strokes, more fluid upon the canvas, a visual symphony of color and emotion that resonated through every fiber, as if their very souls had been painted with them. As dawn approached on a day like no other, they looked back at what lay before them in layers of painstakingly applied pigment. It was not merely art, it was the embodiment of shared experiences and memories that could stir tears if only those eyes beheld their creation with more than just sight. Yet, even as sleep claimed Jonathan's body, his spirit remained within Blithwood Glen, where every brushstroke had captured a moment in time, forever etched into this living legacy, or masterpiece to be held not merely by two friends, but also for generations yet unborn who might one day find themselves drawn beneath its shade and gaze upon their shared history. It was here, at the heart of Blithwood Glen, under a sky that bore witness to countless stories like Fissone's, where souls had danced with destiny in unity against time's relentless march, that Jonathan found peace as his last breath merged back into the essence from which he came. Edward and their shared dream remained untouched by absence, for within every color they blended in Jonathan's absence. Blithwood Glen had become a vessel for memories, a place imbued with warm golden sunsets and cool twilight shadows, where the two friends once ran freely under banners of green and blue that now mingled invisibly on their fading artwork. It was here Edward found himself tracing lines, not merely to recreate, but also to preserve an essence of Jonathan's touch guiding his own hands, as he layered colours with the tender care one might lay a fragile heart upon soothing pillows before sleep claimed him again for good-bye this time. Night after night had Edward sat beneath their masterpiece, whispering to it tales that even Jonathan would have paused from painting mid-sentence to hear stories of shared mischief and dreams too grand for a canvas no bigger than the back seat of an old caravan they'd once journeyed in together. It was as if Blithwood Glen itself had become part of their art, with each leaf on its ancient trees holding fast to stories that would live beyond them, both a living legacy etched within every twig and vein upon the venerable oak trunks they'd often sought refuge under, while Jonathan sketched visions born from a youthful heart. As seasons unfurled their colours with indifferent grace, Edward felt his solitude deepen into companionship or bond that transcended mere friendship and became something almost sacred within the hidden chapel of Blithwood Glen, where he spent many days walking paths Jonathan had once trodden in reckless abandon. It was under this watchful canopy that Edward learned to listen for echoes between heartbeats, finding solace as if his friend's presence lingered just beyond sight, her constant reminder of the transient nature of life and love lost too soon, but immortalized through art, on canvas where every dabbled pigment was a testament they had shared. Their creation in Blithwood Glen became more than an exhibition. It evolved into their final goodbye, each stroke capturing not just the vibrancy of life Jonathan lived, but also its fragility of visual elegy to friendship, where even as sorrow threaded through Edward's heart like delicate lace on his soul's collar. The chill in Blithwood Glen carried more than a touch of autumn. It seemed every leaf that tumbled upon the earth was Jonathan whispering secrets into its decay, and though he could not hear him any more, Edward felt as if through their artwork they were still sharing stories, tales only friends can tell. The nights grew longer, each one a chapter in an unwritten book, where Blithwood Glen became the setting for memories that would forever reside between its ancient stones and timeless trees. Here Edward found solace as he surrendered his sadness to the comforting arms of nature, a refuge from grief's relentless grip. As if in a trance, time slipped by unnoticed, until daylight beckoned with promises of tomorrow, yet tasted not so different when sipped against an empty chalice, where once two souls had clinked glasses, toasting their future they now shared only through the brush and palette. Edward's days became a tender ballet danced with shadows of his friend, each movement in Blithwood Glen more deliberate as he choreographed memories against the backdrop of evergreen giants that stood witness to their bond of friendship so strong it seemed etched into every groove and notch on tree bar. It was within this hallowed place where Edward discovered a solace deeper than any sanctuary could offer, finding peace as he embraced each sunrise with the same hopeful gaze that once met his own in homage to shared beginnings and dreams spun from stardust yet ground in earth's embrace. As time on for in chapter 26 of Edward's tale, with Blithwood Glen as its heart, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for his time spent there, time that seemed to hold more weight than mere hours and minutes ever could on man-made clocks. The sun had just begun peeking over the horizon when Edward stood atop the gentle hill cradling Blithwood Glen in its embrace, casting a final glance back toward where his friend's laughter used to echo among these very trees before he slipped away into memory and legend or tale as timeless as the glen itself. As dawn painted pink and gold across Edward's face, memories flooded in. They had once been two young souls exploring each other's dreamscapes here. Now only one remained to honor that shared future, with Blithwood Glen as his sanctuary of solace, or place where grief felt less like a burden and more like an embrace. Edward traced the moss-covered stones beside him, feeling their cool touch beneath tentative fingers, seeking comfort in permanence amidst transience. He knew that these ancient sentinels had witnessed countless seasons of joy and heartache alike. The first rays illuminated a solitary figure against an open canvas or blank easel set upon the earth, where Edward poured his soul into art, each stroke mending wounds with hues more vibrant than words could ever convey. Here in Blithwood Glen he found freedom not just from sorrow, but also expression. He painted until twilight gave way to velvet nights again, and time seemed irrelevant, or mere suggestion whispered by the wind through leaves, rather an unyielding master of his domain as it once had been when Edward's friend stood beside him in this very act, their shadows merging on Blithwood Glen's earth. Evenings found Edward wandering along paths woven with history and whispers from the past. He sought guidance among these murmuring trees that seemed to speak of times both grim and joyous, living archive, where every rustle, crackling underfoot, or sighing leaf upon a bough held secrets only patience could unveil. Blithwood Glen was not just Edward's refuge, but his muse. Its essence flowed into him as he sketched landscapes that captured the raw beauty of nature and echoes from memories shared with his dear friend, now immortalized in charcoal outlines beneath a sky pregnant with stars. As each day unfolded, like petals under moonlight, scarce a gentle reminder to let go yet never truly forget, the touch of another hand that once graced Edward's own discovered healing here, in this hallowed place where grief and gratitude danced a slow dance across seasons. The trees stood as silent guardians over his heart's journey from loss through acceptance to hopeful rebirth. Their ancient presence was comforting not just because they had outlived empires of men, but also for the stories etched into every groove on their bark, tales that resonated with Edward's own narrative. Blithwood Glen offered him a mirror reflective enough to see his pain and resilience reflected back, or duality so intertwined it became indistinguishable from the forest itself, where sorrow had become as much part of its character as serenity, growth rings marking time with every new bloom or fallen leaf. Here Edward learned he could grieve without being consumed by his loss. Here, amidst whispers and windswept grasses, pain found a rhythm to which it moved in a ritual of remembrance that allowed him breath beneath the weight of emotion once felt so crushing, as if sorrow itself had been tempered in Blithwood Glen's waters. As weeks melded into months and seasons shifted imperceptibly, Edward came to understand he did not simply visit this refuge, but belonged here, a part of its essence that pulsed with the life force drawn from soil richer than any man-made foundation could provide. His heartbeat synchronized with Blithwood Glen's rustling canopy. When night descended, Edward would often sit upon a fallen log beside the gentle stream threading through Blithwood Glen. Our companion of water and stone whispered to him tales not just about time, but also its meaning within his own life, as he watched moonlight dance across ripples that carried away fragments left behind by grief. In this place, where Edward found a sense of belonging, the artwork began taking shape with unwavering purpose. It was no longer merely for Edward watched as a solitary turtle made its way across the pebbled path he had come to know so well, seemingly unfazed by his presence there. Perhaps it was just content in Edward's company now that time began weaving memories into something tangible. The artwork emerging on canvas seemed as timeless and enduring as Blithwood Glen itself. The strokes of paint were deliberate yet flowing, capturing not only scenes from within these woods, but also encapsulating Edward's journey through grief to healing or mistake, where each color held its own story. As autumn painted a golden hue across Blithwood Glen and the air grew crisp with chill promises of winter, his artwork began taking shape more robustly. It was as if Edward had found purpose in expressing rather than just being consumed by emotion or visual symphony that echoed through every corner where sunlight played hide-and-seek among foliage. One evening, while painting under the vast expanse of a starlit sky, he felt an unfamiliar stir within his chest, not anger or bitterness, but rather warmth and something akin to peace, as memories danced upon canvas alongside vivid splashes of color. Seasons themselves seemed content in their cyclical nature. Edward realized that grief was like the changing leaves, beautiful yet transient, ever present even when not visible on his skin or within my soul's fabric. His days became punctuated with visits to Blithwood Glen, his own personal sanctum, where time whispered secrets and wisdom. Through every rustling leaf and trickling stream spoke of life's impermanence, but also its beauty in the grand tapestry we are all woven into. Edward's fingers, once trembling with unshed tears over a cold glass of water on his makish 0W desk at home, now moved deftly across canvas because he understood that art was not an escape from reality. It became another way to embrace and cope with the truth of life, its fragility as well as its enduring strength. As winter's first frost clung tightly around Blithwood Glen, Edward found himself wrapped in a woolen blanket beneath the canopy, where he often paused his work after long days, spent immersed within nature's embrace and artistic endeavor alike. A moment to simply be present. He felt an innate connection with all living things around him. Even as snowflakes kissed each blade of grass like delicate white feathers, he was reminded that life persists in the most tender forms when we least expect it, and often finds a way despite our absence or neglect or silent oath to cherish these moments. One day, while sketching beside frozen pond waters reflecting an azure sky now veiled behind thin clouds, Edward noticed tiny tracks on ice that told of life persisting beneath the surface. He realized then how grief, too, was a form of nature's unyielding force. It carved its own path through us without our consent, but also led to growth and renewal when we learned from it. With spring's thaw, Blithwood Glen came alive with the promise of new beginnings. Daffodils peeped shyly above ground as if whispering tales of resilience in hushed tones only Edward seemed to understand, or language that spoke directly to his heart and soul. His artwork evolved, taking on more vibrant forms with each season's passage, a reflection not just upon the world around him but also within himself, where he had discovered layers previously unseen. Strength in vulnerability became evident as petals unfolded under warm sunbeams, or testament to life's cyclical nature and his own personal rebirth. On one particularly tranquil spring morning, Edward decided it was time for the world of art that he had fostered within Blithwood Glen's embrace to find a broader audience beyond its borders. Thus began arrangements with local galleries interested in exhibiting this unique work and offering not just from his hand, but also his heart. His journey through grief became an inspiration for others, as they too saw reflected their own struggles and triumphs within the layers of paint on Edward's canvases. He had unknowingly become a beacon of hope in this small corner of Blithwood Glen community, where people began sharing stories not just with one another, but also through artistic expression, or newfound kinship bloomed as freely as wildflowers blanketing fields once barren. As Edward's exhibit came to